We haven't passed it on the way up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Barnoldswick Town Council full meeting. First on the agenda, we'll take apologies for absence.
We've got Councillor Jodie Hoyle and Emma West.
Before we go into item number 2, there is an urgent item to discuss. I believe, David Whip, you have information on the urgent item to discuss.
Thank you. Yes, Chairman. I mean, if you want to take it, later on in the meeting, it's regarding work on the town square. Chairman, in the light of last night's West Craven Area Committee meeting, you may see fit to take an urgent item on the outdoor gym issue as well.
Sure. Yeah. We'll do it later.
Yeah.
Towards the end, okay.
So it's outdoor gyms and then the item that you actually originally asked for.
Yes.
So town square work.
We'll come back to that.
No, I'm saying you've got to agree to it, you've got to say what it is.
Okay. Town square work and the gym, outdoor gyms.
And Chairman, the reason for the urgency, in the first instance, it's because work may be carried out which the Town Council may not wish to be carried out unless we take some action at this meeting. And the outdoor gym, it's in order to try and get the issue reconsidered at the next West Craven Area Committee meeting, and we wouldn't have a meeting before then otherwise.
Thank you. Like I say, we'll come back to that towards the end of it. Item number 2, is there any declaration of interests? Item number 3, open forum to receive questions from the members of the public. Have we had any questions yet?
I haven't.
No, we'll come back to it later on as well, just to check. Item number 4, minutes from the last meeting. We all agreed to pass the minutes from last meeting. Councillor Head, thank you. Item number 5, finances. To approve and accept the to confirm approval of payments made by the town clerk. Has anybody read anybody got questions around the finances? Councillor Whip, yes, you like your...
Yes, Chairman. I'll have to put my other glasses on so I can actually see you, because I've got my reading glasses on. It's not so much the detail of the spending and the payments, but I wonder whether the clerk could highlight those items that have been done under the delegation scheme that we agreed at the last physical meeting, because the virtual meetings, the online meetings, are, they weren't. What's the? I can't think of the word.
Legal.
Well, no, they weren't sufficient to make decisions at. So we delegated the power to Joe to actually enact things that we discussed in those informal settings. There was a majority or a consensus.
So it's just have a look now to see if there's anything to highlight.
Slow down 1 second. I don't think there's been anything that's out of the ordinary, if I'm honest.
Chairman, it might not show up because it hasn't been paid out yet.
Oh yeah, right,
But
okay.
there's a play area.
Right, so the play area at Harrison Street had some wear and tear on a teacup that's there, and it had come a little bit loose in the ground, so we've had it removed for safety purposes. We've had quotes into which includes taking it out, take it out, put it back in again, and resetting 2 metres of safety servicing, and it's just over what my ordinary delegated powers are, so it's about 12.30 maybe. We've instructed the company to get on with it because it is sort of routine, a repair that was needed, but I just need to let you know that that's been done. And I can't think of anything else. I'll have to think about it. I think all the rest of it is all into a meeting prior to that.
Perhaps for the next meeting, if there is anything, we could
I can
highlight
look,
it in here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, can I just ask one, because I don't know what it is. Number 7158 that's on that page.
yeah,
That's
minute books, these. If you go in my office, there's a pile of new ones.
Sorry, I just thought one was a minute book.
Sorry.
Do I want one?
Because they'll come back and there's only 6 and where they are.
Any more on the finances? Are we all happy to approve and pass the finances over here? Item number 6, grant application to consider a grant from the Rolls-Royce Bowling Club for £1,000 towards mowing equipment. Have you got any comments on this?
Chair,
Sorry, Ken, Councillor Hartley.
thank you kindly. I'm not objecting to this in any way, shape or form. It's a relatively small amount for a very large expense as far as that bowling club is concerned. However, I think it's worth recognising what this application really represents. Just dealing with the issue itself, the mower that they're asking for us to part fund, even in its very basic form, with no bells and whistles, is a £5.5 mower. So, 1,000 towards it is a relatively small proportion. However, the mower in itself isn't sufficient to maintain a decent standard on a bowling green. If you wanted the same model of mower with the additional attachments that are necessary, like the vertical trims and the scuffers and the rest of it, then you're talking 10 grand. Now, I understand that the reason or the rationale behind this is that what was the Rolls-Royce Bowling Club and the bowling green behind the welfare centre has been given a 3-year finite contract to continue to be able to use it. So withdrawal of support for the club is already in place. They've stopped funding it in any way, shape or form. They've got to fund their own activity, including maintenance of the bowling green. But the fact that they've only been given a 3-year fixed term lease, non-renewable, as far as I know, heralds to me somebody's flying a flag that 3 years from now something major is going to happen down there. Either the welfare centre itself will be sold off and the land itself will be put on the open market, and it's all private building land. It's all prime building land. But I think that this indicates that Rolls-Royce has signalled that within 3 years there won't be a Rolls-Royce welfare in Barnoldswick.
Councillor Whip.
Chairman, again, not speaking to the grant application, which I think we should approve. I'm perhaps not as pessimistic as Ken about the future of the leisure centre. And I know that Bernie has been looking at alternative ways of income generation, and I've had a conversation with Bernie, or he's had a conversation with me, which he was looking at ways of getting enough funding to continue having the groundsman, but in the conversation that I had with him, that was for the Sportsfield side of Skipton Road, but I assume it's all tied into, maintaining the grounds at the leisure centre, the banking up the front and everything as well. And I didn't go too deep into it, but I made the assumption, which may not be correct, that the funding that the club has previously got has been pulled back, and therefore, in order to keep things going, there needs to be more income coming in through other means. And I haven't spoken to Bernie recently, and I don't know how far he's got with those particular aspects. I think the much wider concern is the future of Rolls-Royce as a company within the town. It's not that long ago that this council, together with others, was passing resolutions, trying to prevent them from offshoring the work. The work is going to Singapore. The work is going to Spain, and that's why there's been workers recently in dispute with the company, because Rolls said that there would be certain things kept in Barnoldswick, and the feeling is that those things aren't being kept in town. So, it just sort of gets you nervous about the longevity of Rolls' place in Barnoldswick, and obviously all the implications that there may be there. And I'm not sure what, if anything, we can do about it. It's all international offshoring, high company policy, a government that doesn't seem to want to keep manufacturing industry in Britain, and the loss of advanced manufacturing and skilled jobs to elsewhere. But I think, Ken and I are coming at this from the same direction. I wouldn't want to hold any of that against granting the £1,000 to the bowling club people who are doing the right thing in, trying to keep the bowling club going, and all power to their elbow. Whether the funding that we give them is sufficient, together with the other, I noticed, they've got various other applications in. I think remains to be seen. Just one last thing. When we revamped Victory Park, which the decisions, it's 20 years ago since we began the process of looking at what we wanted to do at Victory Park and raising funds, and ultimately there was something like £2 million invested in Victory Park. But one of the issues we looked at was the bowling green, because at the time it was still there in its full square. The surface was quite poor because people hadn't been playing on it. Well, I'll rephrase that. People hadn't been playing bowls on it, probably had been playing football on it, and the surface wasn't good. And one of the reasons why we were, as councillors of the day, prepared to allow the bowling green to fall permanently out of use was the presence of the Rolls Bowling Club, which allowed the bowlers to go there. They hadn't been using the Victory Park one for donkeys years before that. So it really is the last facility of its sort in the town, and we want to see it continue.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
I was going to move on to that particular point in terms of bowls itself. There are bowling greens at most, I'm saying most, at least half the major parks in Pendle. However, it's generally acknowledged that Pendle Council has absolutely no idea how to look after a bowling green. And therefore any suggestions that we might have made to say, well, why don't you contract in from Pendle Council or whatever it is, are just non-valid. It's a complete waste of time asking Pendle to look after a bowling green. On the other hand, the one that does have success throughout the northwest here is the bowling green at Alkincoats in Con, which is maintained by the members, long-term members. There are members of the Rolls Bowling Club, existing members, who do have the knowledge and the capability of maintaining that green to an acceptable league standard. So I had no compunction at all about saying, well, yes, we're going to accept whatever the long term may be, but £1,000 is well worth the investment as far as I can see to keep that bowling activity in Barnoldswick.
Sorry, Councillor Hurd first. We'll come to you, sorry, George.
Can I suggest we just move the proposal and approve the grant for £1,000?
Well, I've already proposed that you
I'll
did.
second it then.
We'll come to that in a second. Thank you, Councillor
I
Wilson.
was just going to ask what the maximum is on this grant form. How much can we actually give?
We have a budget of £7,000 per year. We generally keep it around 1,000 because you do have some people that apply once a year.
No, I was only going to suggest that if we had funds to do a little bit more towards it, like Ken said, it's a significant proportion, but if we've got a bit more to give, then it means that they've got less to try and find someone else. Then I'd be happy to give a little bit more.
Chairman, more than happy in approving the 1,000 in the approval letter to indicate that, should they require further funding, the town council would look at that in a favourable light.
Yes.
Agree with that. So
Yeah.
we've got a motion there from David. In a second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
If,
All in
so,
favour? Unanimous.
so if further funding is not required by outside bodies, then the town council will be happy to consider a second application in the financial year, because that's outside our remit.
The phrasing was slightly different.
Go on, Brown, you go on then. Happy to approve
Well, I
that.
can't remember it. It's 2 minutes.
I don't want to get it wrong.
I think the phrasing needs to be, if outside funding acquired is not enough.
It's insufficient.
Is insufficient.
Well, I'll be careful though, because that might encourage them to go for the bloody Rolls Royce version rather than
Yes.
the bog standard version.
Yeah.
Well, we have this for Pendle Triathlon, that's why I'm
I
being a
would
little
just
bit
word,
cautious.
I would just word it to say that further applications will be
Consider.
considered.
Well,
Yeah.
should further funding be recorded? We can always look at
Yeah.
the recording, can't
We will
we? See where I
consider
move.
a
See where I
second,
move.
we will consider a second application, yeah?
Yeah.
It is fine.
All right. I thought that one was easy. Reach to the next one. Item number 7. Hot potato asset transfers from Pendle Borough Council to Barnoldswick Town Council. We had a partially heated meeting with Pendle Borough Councillors. And there are a number of items that Pendle Council wants to transfer into the hands of Barnoldswick Town Council. The list is quite long. So town centre sweeping, local car parks, cemeteries and sports pitches, and miscellaneous other pieces of land. Obviously with that comes cost.
This is the only cost I have asked for costings, income and expenditure, management time, staffing, for all those items, and the only one we've received is this bus stop one. These are dates, year 18-19, the year 19-20, and the financial year 2021. Sorry, I didn't make it very
Car
clear.
parks.
That's just for car parks, sorry, yes.
So you did say bus stops,
You
It's
just
been a
say
really long
what's
day. It's been a really long day. And it's warm.
My own personal opinion is that we need to think of this very, very carefully, because taking on this amount of additions could drastically affect our own precept. For example, you know, one of the things I mentioned in the meeting was the retaining wall in the Court car park. If we take on the Court car park and that retaining wall fails, that could hundreds of thousands of pounds, which as a council we clearly don't have to spend. Yes, Councillor Lindsay, sorry.
But if we don't take on some of the car parks or all of the car parks, what's going to happen to them? They're going to be built on and we're not going to have any town centre.
No, if we don't take them on, Pendle Council will keep them.
No.
Councillor Whip, Tom Whip, sorry, first.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think the risk with the car parks is if, I mean, I know it's stalled for now, but if the devolution deal sort of sparks up again and we get lumped in with Blackburn, it's highly likely they're going to be all paid for parking. But I don't think there's an imminent risk in the near future of that, given government has said we're putting a pause on it for now, and I don't think, you know, we should accept the costs there of any of the car parks as long as there's no risk of us losing them. The only thing in this list that I would seriously consider is the town green. Just, you know, so with that we could use it for stuff that we wouldn't otherwise be able to.
Where does that figure? Does that come under
I think it's
miscellaneous
under
pieces of land?
miscellaneous pieces of land.
Yeah.
We don't know what they all are.
Well, the miscellaneous pieces of land must also include the town square, presumably.
Memorial Gardens.
The memorial gardens.
Possibly.
I haven't been told, but
We don't know.
they didn't tell us.
We kind of need to know really what we voted on.
During the meeting I did ask for a full breakdown of everything, and Joe's already obviously asked me before we went to the meeting with Mr. Rob and have the information.
Can I ask a question? So the town green has town green status. Yeah. So we already have use of it, but we don't have any cost of it. Nothing else can happen to it. It'll always be a town green. Why would we take it?
Maybe, but the way things stand legally at the moment, yeah. Who knows with this government what the hell we're going to do?
If you bear in mind that whatever we take on, it's full take on, you know, maintenance costs, repair costs.
And it's done to a very good standard.
Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. It's obvious, you know, looking at this list, that Pendle's got to a crunch point. And what we've got now are being asked to take on big money items. All of them, you know, essentially could have big price tags associated with them in terms of long-term maintenance, long-term implications. I'm still smarting as an ex-Pendle councillor on the way that this whole project has been handled from the word go by Pendle Council itself. In other words, councils that have shown willingness to assist in saving Pendle money, like ourselves, have taken on assets from Pendle Council, which has allowed other town and parish councils to ignore their responsibility. And no real pressure, as far as I'm aware, has been put on the other councils to twist their arms. And therefore, you know, having looked at this list, my first reaction was to say, as far as this council is concerned, we've built more houses and built more bridges with Pendle Council on what we've already taken on compared to a lot of the other councils in Pendle. And we ought to say, well, we're going to take a year's sabbatical and we'll look at it again in another year's time. In the meantime, Pendle, you get off your backside and get other town councils to accept their responsibilities to the degree that we've accepted ours. And simply, you know, my reaction or my proposal to council would be to say, well, you know, thank you, Pendle. We appreciate the offer of transferring these assets to us, but we do need time to think about it, and therefore we'd like to bring it back in a year's time, and in the meantime take no further action as far as this list is concerned.
It was mentioned during the meeting that Barnoldswick Town has done more than any other council in the borough, and they were very thankful for it, but I agree with you. Councillor Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, I've got...
Two hats.
I've got this stupid hat on, sorry.
Two hats.
That was your
I've
Pendle
got the
hat.
hat on as a Pendle councillor. I'd forgotten about the hat.
That's your hat as a
That was
Pendle
for the
councillor.
sun outside. I wear the hat of the Pendle councillor, and I ought to have been in attendance at the meeting that you had. You know where I'm coming from here, Chairman. But unfortunately, Councillor Tom Whitt had to work unexpectedly on that Wednesday, so I ended up going and picking him up at the same time as the meeting was on. I'm not quite clear exactly what was said, although I have had various reports from different people who attended, and I think it was rather unfortunate that the chairman of the budget working group at Pendle opened the meeting by saying that the previous administrations at Pendle had not taken any action about the budget deficit.
Not got a grip of it.
Not got a grip of it. You know, and this is a new councillor coming on to Pendle Council who doesn't appreciate in the last decade that there's £11 million been cut out of the budget. The staffing has virtually halved, and the government have removed 70%, 70p the pound of the funding that they used to give in 2010. And every time we save £1 million, the government take another £1 million off you, so you actually don't get any better off. Putting that to one side, I think the approach that the town council has taken is, as previously, been to say, right, well, you know, we'll take whatever's going within reason, and as long as it's across the board, across Pendle. So therefore, if we were taking on responsibility for the town centre, the town square effectively in Barnoldswick, then the expectation would be that Colne would take over the responsibilities for the pedestrian areas within Colne, Nelson would do similarly, and so on and so forth, so that we don't have the trap of double taxation, where people in Barnoldswick are paying to Barnoldswick Town Council to look after the town square, and then paying Pendle Council for them to look after the precinct in Colne or the pedestrian area in Nelson. And I think that's a principle that we've managed to stick to. I think the one area where, and we've got a bit of a caliphudge which is sort of making it bearable for the town council, is in respect of Victory Park, where if you look at the list, it says that they're prepared to consider asset transfers of sports pitches. Well, Victory Park is called a park, but actually virtually every blade of grass that grows on it and all the ancillary bits are all sports pitches. You know, we've got cricket wicket, we've got football pitches, we've got rugby pitches, we've got training areas.
Half a bowling.
And we've got a junior pitch, and we've got about 7/8 of a bowling green, but it isn't maintained as a bowling green anymore. So, we took Victory Park on as a park, because it was called a park, but you don't find that Holt House has been transferred to Colne Town Council in Colne. Swindon playing fields haven't been transferred to Nelson Town Council in Nelson. Bullholm playing fields haven't been transferred to Barrowford Parish Council in Barrowford, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, it's palatable to the town council because, and we had a little bit of a struggle this last few months, but hitherto we've always been reimbursed for the cost of the pavilion. So although we are paying the bills, the town council is paying the bills, Pendle Council reimburses that money, and so we aren't any worse off as a consequence of having the ownership of Victory Park. But if there was any difficulty in terms of those reimbursements, I think we would be knocking at the door very quickly to say, well, hang on a minute, you know, we're paying for sports pitches and these other areas aren't. At the moment, those costs aren't falling on us to any great extent. So, you know, I think we could fluff that one. Up until recently, we were quite, as a town council, we were quite fearful of a takeover by a mega unitary authority. And Councillor Tom Witt mentioned Blackburn, which is the likelihood. My assessment of the unitarisation agenda is that that's receded. If the prevailing wind changes, I think there would be enough time for us to be able to say, well, yeah, hang on a minute, we'll take X, Y, Z as a town council so as to protect it from that big mega council and, you know, being insensitive to local needs. And the point that Tom was making about charges on car parks. And I think that applies to the other stuff. I think the one issue that we may have to consider is if Pendle Council withdraw any services that we would like to see continued. And I'll use town centre sweeping as an example. They might decide to cut the town, you know, the hand sweeping.
Isn't that a statutory requirement?
No, it's a statutory requirement to sweep the streets, but going back 20 odd years, Pendle, I mean, they have the hand sweepers in the town centres, but the street sweeping was perhaps once every 3 months if you were lucky. There weren't any mechanical sweepers that went round on a weekly or a fortnightly basis, and I was one of the people that introduced that when we took control in the noughties sometime, and we actually invested in the mechanical sweepers. You know, we said, right, we want to improve that service. Up until 20 odd years ago, there wasn't that residential street sweeping on a regular basis. It just didn't happen. You might get a big machine round come autumn if you were lucky. Otherwise, the leaves just lay on the ground and you had a slippy road to contend with. So, yes, street sweeping is a statutory service. The frequency and the standard to which it is carried out is not defined. And if Pendle Council chose to reduce the town centre hand sweeping and did away with that operative, you know, that isn't statutory. We couldn't take them to court on that. They're still providing a sweeping service, might only be every 3 months. So I think, and there might be other examples I can't think of, but I think we just need to keep a watching brief if there are any threats to services that we would wish to continue because they are of benefit to the town. You know, do we want to have someone tending to the town centre? So
if back to Pendle and decline to accept on this occasion at this moment in time, but request if they plan to make any changes to come back and ask again.
Well, I wouldn't.
What changes are going to be?
I wouldn't put that in a letter to Pendle. You know, there's various of us are on Pendle Council. We know, you know, we're very well plugged into what is going on. So, you know, we could blow the whistle if it became necessary. Yeah. So, but I just think we need to bear that in mind as a town council in refusing to accept I mean, Ken described them as assets. I think of more as liabilities.
Liabilities. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, just a simple statement that says, you know, we'll keep these under consideration and, you know, return to the negotiation at an appropriate time or something like that. You know. I'm sure we can get away with that legally.
Is that your proposal, Ken?
Yeah,
Do
effectively.
we have a second for Ken? Councillor Kerr, thank you. All those in favour, say aye.
Right, so you want me to write to you? And you want to say that, hold on.
Ken, what did you say?
What did I want to say?
Yeah.
I wanted to say, well, you know, thank you very much for the offer of the transfer of these.
Thank you, well, thank you.
I'm sure Councillor
Thank
Howard
you.
will help you with the wording.
Put on hold for 1 year.
No.
Well, no,
No.
forget the 1 year that we, you know, we'd like to consider the matter further.
At this current
And, you know, we'll come back to you when we're ready, kind of.
Etc.
Sorry?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much.
Chairman, do we want to also have a resolution, and which, I mean, Ken touched on this, and I know Joe and perhaps yourself raised it in the meeting that you're reporting back on, and that's the question of whether in other parts of Pendle the services have been reduced as a consequence of either town and parish councils not picking up the costs of doing things or not accepting the transfer. I think Joe...
I asked the question in the meeting. So I asked the question that at the moment we've taken on all our play areas and the likes of Briarfield haven't. So my question to them was that morning we'd had a bill for £1,230 for repairs to one of our pieces of equipment because we own it. I asked the question if the same had happened in Briarfield, who would have been presented with the bill. Now, Philip Morsdale told me it was Briarfield Parish Council, but it doesn't belong to them. Because I was on the understanding, if, say, and this is the threat that we were threatened with, if, for example, Barnoldswick didn't take their bus stops and a bus stop paying got smashed, it would get removed, and eventually the bus stop was in disrepair, it would be angle grounded off and taken away. So my image when that was put to us is that we're going to end up with a town that was completely unloved. Does that happen in other parts of the borough? Because I haven't been anywhere where it looks like the bus stops have been taken away and we've got a whole town that doesn't pay a penny towards theirs.
Chairman, I wish we'd have stuck to the play area
Sorry.
example.
Not right.
On the bus
I think
stops,
it's right.
on the bus stops, it was certainly the case in Nelson. Nelson didn't take the bus stops on, and I do know that there were bus stops cut down.
Right.
You know, if they were damaged, somebody ran into them. Instead of being replaced, they just chopped them down and did away with them. And there's a really good example on Market Street, I think it is, in Nelson, near the town hall, where there's sort of like the uprights of the bus shelter, but the roof is missing. And every time I park next to the library, it makes me laugh that there's this partial bus shelter that's absolutely never used to ban the beast. However, the change in bus stops is that on the main line, the county council has taken on all the bus stops on the quality bus route through to Oak Street at Colne. So all those new super duper bus shelters rather than bus stops, have been provided by the county council and will be maintained by the county council. And I think we've got a resolution as a town council saying, please county council, we'd very much like to see our bus shelters, apart from the ones that we have on Fernley Avenue and Station Road, being taken over and looked after and paid for by the county council rather than us. But that's not a Pendle Council matter. I think, Chairman, the additional bit is do we, as a town council, want to ask Pendle Council if the services and facilities that have been currently transferred, present, at the moment, have been transferred, is there equity across Pendle in terms of the level of service provided by the Borough Council in those areas where the Parish Town Council hasn't taken things on or isn't paying for the grass cutting or whatever it may be. And I think, we ask that as a very specific question so that we can then see if there is any double taxation taking place and people in Barnoldswick and elsewhere are disadvantaged because another council isn't picking up the council.
Mike, just on that, I just wonder, could we ask for proof? If that's the case, can we ask for proof of evidence of?
I tried looking up another council's finances because ours, you would be able to tell what we've been spending on what to see if it was the case that if something happened in another town, they were paying those bills but they didn't have any finances on their page. Get it solved.
Mike, just before we move on, going back to the rather painful meeting last night, which I watched every minute of it on live stream, shows you how exciting TV was last night. Sorry about that. CCTV, do we want to spend a few minutes on CCTV on the emergency items that we mentioned as a result of last night's meeting?
What was that?
I'm waiting for David's reactions.
Well, Chairman, I suppose it is a previous asset transfer that has been enacted, so just to recap for people who aren't aware, I reported some criminal damage at Victory Park a few weeks ago, and I asked Joe if the hub at Blackburn could check the CCTV. I also reported the incident to the police because there was like 160 quid worth of items destroyed. The response from the hub at Blackburn was on the lines of, if this has been reported to the police, we will wait until the police have asked us, we won't look it up for you, which, given that Barnoldswick Town Council owns the system, I thought a bit odd. We actually pay them to provide a service. However, just put that to one side. Leanne, who is one of the local policing officers, Leanne Greenwood, contacted me, and she said, well, I'll ask if Blackburn have got footage, and she did that subsequently. She then said, oh, well, they've come back and said part of the incident has been caught on camera. But I'll have to find time to go to Blackburn. And I'm thinking, what do you mean go to Blackburn? The police station over the road has the monitoring equipment, and it's always been the case in the past that local police officers just, sort of clicked a button and they could review whenever it was. And if the hub at Blackburn have already identified the time, then they can go straight to it and lift it straight away. And anyway, what Leanne said was, and I'm just trying to get the words exactly, that they could no longer do it, and I'm not sure why they couldn't do it.
I believe it was a training issue, wasn't it?
Well, that's what was said. That's what was said at the area committee last night, which is what Ken's referring to. So, we've got this very unsatisfactory situation, and we have previously as a town council discussed CCTV and whether should we have local monitoring and this, that and the other. And when we paid for the upgrade of the CCTV system, because within, Pendle Council put new cameras in before it got transferred to us, and also upgraded the broadband and the links and stuff like that, so that there could be local, as well as the monitoring in Blackburn at the hub, there could be local monitoring at Barnoldswick Police Station and Nelson Police Station. And what we were told last night, and Ken might remember this better than me, was that the facility wasn't currently available because there were data issues.
They were updating the system.
Data protection?
Yeah, they said they were updating the system. I think there were some weasel words in there. I think it's all to do with protocols and who can see it and who can look at it, you know, and who can, all that sort of stuff. I think it's constabulary, in part, constabulary and the new people who are running the hub at Blackburn, who are getting all sort of, if I say officious.
There's somebody taking over the role of like leading the hub, and he is the chap that used to go in and advise police on things like CCTV. He's very with protocol and procedure.
Yeah.
Because he's gone in and said, this isn't right, that's not right, that's not right. And he'd given himself like a year to put all these like qualifications in place and certain standards and things like that. So it probably is something to do with that. When I asked about transferring the CCTV, they said we were in a partnership with them.
Yeah, well, Chairman, I mean, your job, you know full well that you can always find reasons why you shouldn't do things.
Yeah.
You know, you cover your back stuff, you could go on forever. Just sort of, you know, sort of say, well, you've got to tick this box, you've got to tick that box, you've got to tick the other box. And you know, if somebody plays that card, or that pack of cards, then you're stuffed, because, you know, instead of having a can-do attitude, I mean, I'm not saying you should be pushing beyond the boundaries, there are boundaries and they need to be stuck to, but, you know, when it comes to investigating crimes, you know, and police officers wasting hours of time having to travel down to Blackburn to review footage, when, you know, that could be 2 hours that they're actually patrolling or, you know, investigating other crimes or dealing with people who are vulnerable. I just find it appalling. We were told last night that the police have got a new protocol where there will be a member of the police. I don't know, I think it was a...
Sitting in Blackburn.
Police officer sitting at
Yes, yeah. So the police officer can lift the footage and feed it into the police system, and the local police officer can pick it up from their terminal. Yeah, it goes on. But as a town council, paying the bills for the CCTV, wanting a local monitoring system, I think it just begs the question whether our review of what we actually do and what we get ought to be, you know, pushed up the agenda a bit.
Right.
Yeah, we did start looking at this previously, didn't we? And we still haven't got a contract with anybody that we can view to see what is supposed to be being done, what is being done.
Very reluctant to give it up.
We just get a bill. So, well, that's why I said.
We don't
Stop
own
it.
just every day.
Yeah. There was also an issue with the CCTV camera down at Victory Park. Was the swivel? Was it the timing of the swivel or something? I can't remember.
8 locations or something, wasn't it? They said it was going round 8 and it was
Yeah.
it going round too
It
fast?
was
or-
going
Yeah,
down
too
to
slow.
locations.
Too slow.
Yeah, it took 3 minutes to return to the...
Too slow then.
Too slow.
Yeah, but you know,
You've got to give and take a little bit.
You choose your settings and, you know, prioritise what you think is priority.
But we've already had the discussion previously again about having more cameras at Victory Park, so,
Yeah.
He was reluctant to do that.
well, I don't care.
We had to put, he said you'd have to put a business case to say why you haven't put barriers in, and there was all sorts that, and he ended up tying me in knots, not literally.
I think the expression at the time was, you've got to do everything else before
Yeah,
you consider
that was
putting CCTV in. So, like, you know,
It's not
you have a machine gun emplacement before a CCTV.
Yeah, that's basically the level that he was saying you had to get to, because we can't go around putting cameras everywhere and make it like this.
I think we need to revisit that.
Right, okay. And then
Councillor Whip.
Thanks, Chair. I won't talk about the last bit, but fundamentally, we pay for a service to get the footage monitored and reviewed, and you know, if it wasn't being investigated, they would have done a report on it of the actions that have happened in that span that we gave, and that wasn't done when requested, and no adequate reason for that was provided. I mean, under police investigation, well, sure, but I mean, it doesn't make a difference in my view, and I think we need to just send a sternly written letter saying, look, we pay for a service and we expect it.
It does come down to service quality, which has been poor for sure.
honestly, sometimes I will chase the same thing 6 times. And it's that thing, isn't it, where we pay for a service and you think that that's it and it's gone, but 6 times chasing it is 6 people who, the person coming back to your office 6 times, or you contacting them saying I still haven't got it and it's another week down the line. And I know there's one where there's an accident outside your work the other week, a lady in a minute, and I have chased it every week if it goes to craft class, and every week she walks in and I think, so
Okay. Item number 8 on the agenda then is the Town Green Path. Councillor Tomlin.
Thanks, Chair. This was on the agenda for the area committee last night, and they did agree to commission the engineers to draw up a design. I mean, I think we need to send a letter of support for the scheme and potentially provide some funds in the future if there's not adequate ones from the capital programme.
Councillor David, you had your hand up, I believe you there.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. For any members that aren't aware of the proposal, Councillor Tom Whip has asked Pendle Council if they would widen the footpath that goes across to Cravenside from the corner of Wellhouse Road, junction of Wellhouse Road and Fernley Avenue. At the moment it's maybe 4 foot wide, 1.2 metres, and there's not enough space for people to pass. As the Town Council, we've considered, we've actually agreed to put a bench bay along it with a passing place, so that particularly wheelchairs, but you know, prams and people in mobility scooters, whatever, you know, could actually pass without going onto the grass, which come winter is very soggy. So Pendle Council are looking at that element of the proposal, which is what Tom was asking for. Separately, the Bloom Group has been considering installing a more decorative path, a practical path, but one that's based on the fact that that land used to be the railway sidings. So the path would be comprising of sleepers, and you know, as if it was a railway track, would go from Wellhouse Road opposite the War Memorial with a new opening in the wall, and then link onto the existing path or the widened path in order to create a new route. And the sleeper path would have resin bonded aggregate in the centre section for people to walk, and then you'd have limestone as if it was a track bed towards the edges, and then the Bloom Group would be looking at doing some appropriate planting within that gravel edging. So you've got the centre path, which could be used by people on foot or in wheelchairs. That would be smooth and level, and then the edges would be made up of the planted margin, which would look very attractive, and it would be a permanent feature celebrating our railway history, and the fact that 150 years ago we had a railway in the town for a century and a bit. So it's that bit that I was keen for the town council to get involved with, because clearly, I mean, the Bloom Group have got a bit of brass, but they probably couldn't afford to do this. And in the past, there's always been a partnership approach between Pendle Council, the Town Council, the Bloom Group, best example being the revamp of the Memorial Gardens, which in total was probably £70,000 or £80,000 of a scheme. Now, things have changed at West Raven Area Committee, but this is something that might have literally have legs and might have tracks and might be really wonderful in the future. Look good, be practical, open up a new route, and benefit the good townsfolk of Barnoldswick.
Councillor Hurd, you had your hand up. Okay, Councillor Yours.
Just on that one, the new Bloom Group route, would there be an information board about the historical fact of that at all?
Well, Chairman, you might recall that we set up a little working group which is chaired by Councillor Church into providing a heritage trail, and certainly it would be a key location, to celebrate the history of the railway. So, I mean, I would say yes, but that's prejudging what the working group comes up with.
Just thought I'd mention that in the grand scheme of things.
So in basic terms, a letter of support for the widening of the path, and further to that, a further suggestion of an extra path.
Yeah, and I think request Pendle Council's engineers if they could look at the two things in tandem. They'd be separate, but do them in conjunction with each other. And if the contractor does come in to do one job, perhaps both jobs could be done at the same time.
Okay. The second time.
Yeah.
Can we exclude a colour?
Yeah. We want to agree to do it, actually
No,
do
to
the
design it.
to design
Yeah,
it.
because like we need costing and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Right.
Costs, right.
Agree to design, come back with cost, yeah?
Yeah. There's a joint partnership enterprise
With
and the council and us and the Blue Group.
joint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would we not want Bloom to give them a design scheme to work from? Something schematic to work from?
Well, Chairman, I mean, we can provide a sketch.
Yeah, some kind of sketch, rather than getting engineering
Yeah.
with a pencil free rein.
Draw a sketch.
Yeah, I mean, Chairman, it was a very iterative process. Well, with the Memorial Gardens and with the Sensory Garden, where initially we did a sketch. I'm talking Bloom Group. That went to Pendle to formalise it into engineering drawings and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But sort of like it feeds on itself. Could I just say, it won't be possible to sort of link the any rail track path into the existing path as if it was a rail line, because the curve would be too long and so. But it'd have to be a sort of like a.
Doesn't stop Pendle putting that path right through the middle of the cenotaph area. does it?
Well, no, I don't think we'd move the war memorial.
Well, that
Again.
that might be part of their proposal.
No.
Let's move all goals again to what reaction we get.
If we give them nothing to start with, if you give them a blank sheet of paper, they'll come back with reinstalling the Skipton railing associated with it and all.
Well, yeah, there's always that.
Item number 9, tree report. To receive and consider tree risk management proposal.
I've realised I sent it you quite a while ago. And I did start to print them and then I realised I wasn't going to have no ink for anything else for the rest of the week. We've had the tree report back and there's absolutely loads of work needs doing. So one, I need a budget because at the minute we do not have a budget header for it. It's costing approximately between £250 and £300 a tree to do any work. From a public point of view, I think some are going to perceive the work unnecessary, but we've got a load of trees, ash dieback, which we've seen there's quite a lot that's really evident that they're not in great shape. So one, budget, 2 is how we approach this publicly. So it's not going to be a popular thing to do, but they've been, we've had a contractor go out who's an expert in the field. They've looked at all the trees that we have under our ownership and these are their recommendations. So the biggest thing is budget.
How much from the budget we're looking at?
But put it this way, one contractor said it would take him a week to quote it
Just to quote it. Jeez.
and turned it down. So what I'm considering now is making it in smaller batches and maybe just doing areas and getting going out to quotes. I was there for a single one. Needs 3 quotes, so it's going to be massively time consuming, but I do need to crack on with it. So yeah, so I just need some budgets and let you know that it's going to happen. So when you start seeing these bills rolling.
Councillor Harley.
Can we have a copy of the report?
I've sent it out already. We have had it.
No,
For a while
definitely
ago.
not. Definitely not.
I bet you would. I bet you it was. I'll find a date. I will send you it again tomorrow. Okay.
Definitely not.
Councillor Tom.
Do you know?
Thanks, Chair. My suggestion would be to start on only the things marked urgent in the report. There's a grading scale, and
Yeah.
a lot of those things, we could put off for a year, have a new budget header next year, and
Yeah.
get a proper handle on it. But for the things marked urgent, if there's a risk of liability there, I think really we should be seriously
Yeah.
looking at firing from reserves, maybe.
Yeah. Create budget for next year.
Yeah. That would be my proposal.
Okay.
And with the well, we don't really.
We don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Well, just put a figure out it,
£5 grand.
£5,000. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, £5 grand. We can always bring it back to you if need more. In terms of the getting the quotes, I think really a day rate approach might be the more
Right.
sensible and easiest to in terms of bureaucracy.
Yes,
'cause,
that's absolutely fine. Yeah. One did say do it on that basis, but we've done another job that we did on that basis, and I didn't think we got value for money.
yeah.
So I think it was a few years ago, but it just felt a little bit bitten by it.
So we need to think
Not
about
that it's my personal money. Yeah, right. So tomorrow I'll start. Oh no, I'm on email today. I've got
Councillor David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just thinking about the process by which we select a contractor. Perhaps if there's a small group of people, including Councillor Tomwick, who are willing just to sit down and go through the process, because there's all sorts of, we've got lots of tree surgeons in our area, and they're all good. Some of them are better equipped than others, but we ought to have a list of requirements. So sort of basic things like public liability, necessary certification, all the sort of whatever might come into it, and then their ability to, or sort of references that, you know, would corroborate that they do give value for money. Because if we're going to appoint somebody on a day rate basis or a way in which, you know, we don't get a quote, we need to be able to compare one contractor with another contractor. Or indeed, as Joe suggested, if we're going to have, you know, 2 or 3 different contractors doing different bits, there ought to be some sort of equivalence, and you know, somebody's not getting paid half as much again for similar sort of work. So, I mean, I'm happy to sit down and have a go at it with others. You can see I'm enthusiastic.
So you're suggesting a working group to
Just,
have a
yeah,
tender process?
anybody that's interested, small, you know, handful of people, no,
Councillor
2 or
Hart,
3.
is a volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
I'm
Thank you.
available most days.
Excellent.
Your resolution, Tom.
Allocate budget.
Allocate
Yeah,
budget.
via £5,000 from
Action the urgent
reserves.
ones.
Action the urgent ones. I'll move that.
I'll second it.
This is like one of those things about parks where some haven't taken on their parts and we have. Something like this would have been done by Pendle, and I don't believe the cost would have been passed on.
Not a chance.
Well, we've been, you know, that's £2,000 a quarter, and then all the actions off the back of it, even in case of like time for us to do it, it's not like you can get them and then they're done. And every single thing we take on, you know, is another
It's another
task, isn't it?
Chairman, on the other side of the coin though there is, it was either last year or the year before, because pandemic's a funny thing to sort of
Yeah.
passage of time. But I recollect that one of the Pendle Council operatives who does ground maintenance work, Martin Payne, he spotted trees in Victory Park,
Yeah,
which he thought they were a little bit dodgy, and he reported them internally within Pendle Council. And I think, Joel, you know, we were notified that work was going to take place. Pendle Council did the work. I can't remember. I think they took, you know, 4 or 5 trees out. I forget.
So 3 or something.
Yeah. So you know, it's not like, you know.
I'm not saying they don't do anything, and I have to say that people at parks recently have been amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue with the travellers, I'm not sure what we'd have done without their support. We'd have had to get, you know, an external company or whatever, and the support from the legal team and people on parks. I emailed them to say thank you, because I think...
Which kind of makes more sense for it to be at Pendle rather than here, because if that happens again, we're stuck.
Yeah. And I suppose you could learn the process and you could get the people involved, but it's having that knowledge that they've got all these experts.
Yeah.
We take on cemeteries. I know nothing about running a cemetery. Believe it or not.
They could be profitable.
As well.
Sorry, they could
Yes.
be profitable.
Yeah, but the thing is, for most of those plots, when you pay plot fee, you pay for the next 30 years maintenance of the grounds. Are they going to hand over X number of plots times by?
99 years.
Is that what you pay for? Right, so that's already, for the majority of that site, it's already been paid.
You only pay for the 18 inches in front of the headstone, though. You don't pay for any of that.
You know, 18 inches.
18 inches in front of the headstone. That's all. You don't pay for the entire great plot. It's just the 18 inches. They don't give you the rights to the rest of it in your 99-year lease.
Okay. Item number 10, correspondence items for information. Have you got anything?
I don't think so.
No? We'll go on to
I can remember.
the urgent items.
Forgot about
So,
Yes,
we'll
Chair.
talk about the town square first, if we can, please.
Oh, yeah.
Town Square.
We'll come back to it.
Chairman, I have regular chats with the contractors and, you know, more regularly with the engineers supervising the scheme. as does Councillor Tomwick. And in the latest discussion that I had with the foreman doing the LCC funded flagging work on the pavements, we had a discussion about the dropped curb outside Barlett Bites. And well, I won't go into the details, but in discussing, I call them dimples, but what are they? The flags with raised bits,
yeah.
so they're mobility aids for people who are partially sighted, and Councillor Tomwick has read all the guidance and can quote chapter and verse. But talking to him about the dimpled flags, I'll call them that, Danny mentioned that he had to rip up some of the flags that we as a town council paid to put down on the opposite side of Ellis Street, on the entrance to the town square. And I assume the same would be the case on Frank Street, between Melissa's, between House of Flowers and the entrance onto the town square. We've already paid, between the town council and Pendle Council, for those drops to be put in with the flamed flags, you know, with bit grip and all that sort of stuff. And Councillor Tomwick had suggested that a technique used elsewhere in the country of using metal studs. They could be, you drill a hole, you put some epoxy resin in, you put a metal stud in, and that gives you the same texture as the textured paving that's provided with the solid flags. And this was all sorted out with Pendle engineers. However, it turns out that Lancashire County Council, in their wisdom, are insisting that the existing flags are removed and replaced with the granite dimpled flags. And I'm just appalled that A, perfectly good work is going to be ripped up, B, the unnecessary and needless cost of doing it, and in particular their rejection of the metal studs as an effective way of giving that mobility aid. And it's even more galling in that someone who lives in Barnoldswick has a business that makes these studs and sells them by the hundreds of thousands all over the country, where, you know, councils have a bit more sense and can see the virtue of actually putting the metal studs in to, you know, paving that's in keeping, rather than insisting on using something else. So I think it's a matter of urgency, because I don't know when they're planning to do it, and Mandy's going to pipe up in a minute and say, oh, they've done that today. Right, good. But, you know, they could sort of go over the road on Ellis Street, rip up perfectly good flags. I mean, can you imagine the public outcry that there would be if this happens? I mean, you know, reputational damage, you know, it's been difficult enough. You know, there's been 6 months when they didn't do a stroke of work. And actually, it turns out, we didn't know at the time, that a lot of that time was lost in the county council insisting on doing stupid things, and Pendle Council trying to resist it and saying, well, no, you know, that's a silly thing to do. But the county council, you know, with the £200,000, they say, well, do it our way, don't bother doing it at all. So a lot of that time when we were waiting for them to get back on site was actually all that wrangling with Lancashire County Council coming up with stupid suggestions like rip up the good flags that we've got down and put some other ones in the place. So what I'd like to propose, Chairman, is that as a matter of urgency, we contact Pendle Council, because they're our lead, to say we are very unhappy that, well, I think unhappy is probably an understatement, that, the flags that we've paid to put down in part are due to be ripped up, when there's a perfectly acceptable alternative using the metal studs that Councillor Tomwick has proposed previously and were previously accepted by the Pendle engineers, and that that you ought to be used as an alternative to doing away with good work.
Who owns that side? That's Pendle, isn't it?
Sorry.
Is it LCC still?
Between Pendle Council and the Town Council,
We paid for that,
we paid for some of the pavements that are the responsibility of Lancashire County Council to be relayed, because we couldn't see the point of, sort of doing half a job. So, the County Council got a very good deal out of it, thank you very much. Talk about double taxation. We're all paying to Lancashire County Council to get its pavements done, and then we're paying for it through Pendle and the Town Council as well. But, we bit the bullet on that one. Anyway, that's my proposal.
So to contact Pendlebury Council as we're unhappy the flags we put down are being removed when a perfectly good alternative is available. Yeah?
Yeah, I'll flesh it out for you.
Excellent,
So.
thank you.
Councillor Tomwick.
Thanks, Chair. As Councillor David did say, I mean, I've read the regulation on this, the guidance, and I mean the County Council is right in what they're saying, in that it should be a contrasting colour. But, and it is a big but, in the guidance it specifically states that reservations should be made around heritage areas, conservation status areas, which our town square is in. And it's very clear that in such a space where it is a conservation area, alternatives can be used, and you can sort of relax the rules around high contrast. And that is exactly what we put forward with the metal studs in the first place, which is a great compromise to keep the look of the town centre. And I think we do need to make our representations to LCC and to Pendle. And I'll second Councillor Wick's proposal.
Okay. Councillor.
Can I raise a matter of filthy lucre? Is there a cost difference?
There will be.
Not
And
to
I
us.
think that the price of metal has
No.
increased greatly since a certain date. But
No.
Councillor Mills first, sorry.
Well, I'm just wanting to answer Chris's question.
You go, if you can answer
Okay.
this one.
Well, no. I mean, it will cost a lot more to rip up flags that we've probably paid, the best part of £200 a square metre to put down, to pay another £200 a square metre to put some different ones down, instead of drilling some holes and putting some little bits of metal in. It would be cheaper to do it with the metal studs.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on what Tom was talking about there about the conservation area status and things like this, should we meet up that letter basically outlining the conservation status part of it and the information that you've looked into, and say, look, it's happening in other places in the UK, in England or wherever, and show some evidence of, maybe pictures or whatever where it's happening elsewhere?
So we've got a first and a second there for that.
Yep, excellent.
Second item then is the outdoor gym. Obviously, we've all watched the West Croydon Area Committee meeting last night.
No.
You watched it?
Oh,
Painful.
yeah. Would one of the council whips like to take this one, as soon as you wanted it on the list?
yeah, I'll speak on it. I mean, it's just utterly unbelievable, really. I mean, it's the first time that a serious proposal from a town council has been turned down at an area committee on political lines. I mean, it's utterly unthinkable, really. We asked for match funding, and they haven't given a penny at all. I mean, we came with an equitable proposal just because of the fact that, you know, the courts part of the Evian courts is within the greater Barnoldswick area, and we said, well, hang on, it shouldn't come out of just the Barnoldswick ward, because I mean the councillors in Evian courts, you know, it doesn't matter to them if they spend their money in courts because, you know, all their voters are in Evian. And they're not wanting to give the courts, people of courts, their fair share of that capital programme, and you know that just set them off. I think we need to ask them to reconsider at the next area committee. You know, it's a project with a lot of benefits, especially after lockdown. Exercise in an outdoor space is a great benefit to people's mental and physical health, and we are going to be asking for money from Sports England and other such bodies who are great proponents of such equipment, and I think it's vital that we do see those in place.
The most frustrating, even the Barnoldswick council rejected it.
Yeah, as well.
Based on. Yeah. Councillor David.
Chairman, I mean, I'm quite hung up on the principle of what happened, and early today I did put a post on Facebook about what had happened at the meeting with a link to the discussion so that people could see for themselves. The thing that concerns me is that there needs to be equity between residents in different parts of West Craven. Now, most of Barnoldswick is in the new Barnoldswick ward, represented by 3 councillors, 2 of whom are sat here, and then the new Courts ward is represented by 3 councillors. New Courts ward is Evian Courts, and I'm one of the Evian Courts councillors. The other 2 were former Evian ward councillors. Now, on a quick estimation, going off the population of the respective parts of the ward, take one step back. Pendle Council allocates capital funding to area committees based on population. So, and it's the electorate actually, because that's the one that's most accurate. The overall pot is divided up according to the electorate in each of the area committee areas. And what should, to my mind, happen is that when getting down to an area committee, we've got different townships, we've got Barnoldswick, we've got Earby, we've got villages, Kelbuck and Suff, Salterford. Those all need to get a fair crack of the whip, they need to get a fair divvy. And to my mind, the Courts ward part of the Barnoldswick township, which is in Evian Courts, according to its population, should get about 25% of the Evian Courts ward funding, which equates to around about £4,000. Now, on the area committee, there's 3 councillors from the Liberal group, 3 councillors from the Conservative group. There's an equality, except that the Conservatives have got the chairmanship of the meeting. So on every issue, they can use a casting vote to overrule what Councillor Adams, Councillor Tomwick and myself might be saying, and they do and have done so, and they did do so last night. So they weren't prepared to have any of the area and Courtswood funding allocated for the outdoor gyms. The Town Council asked for max funding of £10,000. I proposed 1,500 from the area and Courtswood allocation. That was voted down on the casting vote with the chairman, and then Councillor Tom Witt proposed that £8,500 was allocated from the Barnoldswick ward allocation, and that was voted down on the casting vote of the chairman. So this has never happened before. There's always been a consensus. I can't remember any single occasion in the 25, 26 years that we've had an area committee that this has happened, and it doesn't bode very well for the future, because, you know, if the town council put something forward, or if, you know, a suggestion comes, you know, from someone that clearly is not flavour of the month, then you know, it's not likely to get supported. So it's the principle that concerns me as much as the actual project. On the project, there has been quite a lot of comment today, and there isn't universal support for providing outdoor gyms. Now, the town council took a view, you know, collectively, that it wanted to go down the outdoor gym route, and I supported that. Whether the working group wants to revisit that and just look at some of the concerns that have been raised, I think that would be a good idea. But as Councillor Tom Whip says, there ought to be a reconsideration by the area committee of the town council's request. And I think, you know, the points about the courts part of the evening courts being within the Barnoldswick township and the community, the residents of Barnoldswick, using facilities in all of the town. You know, they seem to be saying, well, you can't have any money for something in Victory Park because it's not in Abbey Courts ward. Well, clearly people who live in Courts, you know, over the canal, use Victory Park. Clearly people, you know, there might be something in the town centre.
Do we need to put a ban on people?
You know, it's for the whole of the township, isn't it?
You can't come in here.
I mean, it's an unfair burden on the residents of the Barnoldswick.
I do agree that certainly last night's meeting was handled poorly, I'll say, from the chair for sure. Ethically, I have massive questions over how the West Craven Area Committee have divvied up this funding down to the point of calling it a particular councillor's funds, you know.
Flush fund.
Yeah,
Should the application have been done to an individual borough councillor as opposed to the committee, because that's what the application said?
Chairman, I mean, just taking one step back again, I mean, this was the first warning bell in that Joe put the application in on behalf of the town council, and that could have gone to a previous meeting, but and certainly any late applications under my chairmanship were always allowed to come forward. But the chairman, the current chairman of the area committee, blocked it from being considered at the previous meeting, and at that meeting they introduced this ridiculous ruling about, well, you know, it's this councillor's money, that councillor's money, the other councillor's money. It isn't councillor's money, it is council taxpayers' money, which we are charged with investing. And you know, the difference between the two is a gaping chasm. But I'll shut up.
Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't disagree with anything that councillors which collectively have said on this. It was an appalling situation. My memory tells me that one Barnoldswick councillor did vote against a Barnoldswick proposal previously that resulted in a decision to extend dog bins in our area. Again under a Conservative chairmanship, where a Barnoldswick councillor voted against the majority of Barnoldswick councillors, and we didn't get any dog bins. Whilst we had a big problem. Maybe my memory's skewy there, but I seem to remember that. What I would like to know, formally, legally, from Pendle Council, is what is their allocation policy. In other words, if their allocation policy is strictly to the West Craven Committee on a legal basis through their budget working group, or do Pendle Council as a whole support the allocation to individual councillors? There is a recognised scheme, I may be wrong, but again, I think in County Council, individual councillors do get an allocation, or used to do at one stage. And it seems to me, watching it last night, it was somebody writing their own extension to the rule that gave them individual power as opposed to the collective power of the West Craven Area Committee itself. And therefore, as part of this reconsideration with West Craven Area Committee, I'd like to see in parallel with that a ruling coming from Pendle Borough Council, the legal ruling about the legality of what that decision meant last night.
Councillor, would be happy to extend your proposal to include?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give a second.
We've missed something, I'm real sorry. On one of the minutes, it says that we were going to come back to this committee after the working group for the town centre reopening was discussed. So, sorry for the late notice, but there was a meeting on Monday evening where we talked about what we were going to do about the market and other events that we're going to have in the town square. So it was thought, whilst the work was still ongoing, it probably wasn't feasible to have a market as it was. So we thought if the town square was finished, to relaunch the market on the switch on, and come out and it be about the town square reopening and it all being done and everything else. And then do you want to go through it all? Sorry, I just realised. So then to have markets booked to Christmas. In January, the market generally has a break, and then they were looking at doing a Spud Day in February, St George's Day in April, and then a series of weekly activities until Bands on the Square weekend. I can send everybody this. On Saturday, to have maybe some, during the summer months, to have special events with live music and other entertainment on stage that required. So I just needed to know the council's views.
Okay, Councillor Gosling.
In very
I
late.
know it's something that we decided that we would do this year when the town square was finished, but since we've got a bit late in that happening. I'd like to see something like that happen, from those days. I think it'd be quite good and get like people that do their own painting and get some stalls at a free cost or cheap-ish. But yeah, I'll be up to that.
Councillor Tomlin.
I was obviously part of that discussion and I'm in favour of all of it. I think we need to seriously consider asking Penborough Council to community asset transfer the stage once it is procured to the town council. I think it's a bit silly of them to say, it's under the, what do you call it, management of the town council, but it's still retained ownership by Pendle. I think that's just asking for a complex mess in 5-10 years time when someone says, well, hang on, who's these belong to? Why are we storing these, etc., etc. I mean, it's happened before.
Are they going in my office?
Maybe. I mean, that's the open-ended question. And it's happened before with stuff that Pendleborough Council's retained ownership, but we use it solely. And I think we just need a clear bottom line under that.
Should we add that to item 7?
Chairman, in the first instance, we'll try and sort that out by the usual channels.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, then we'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the transfer of assets, do we want the town square? Because we don't.
We said not earlier in the meeting, haven't we?
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. We're just
Yeah, we
saying
don't own the town square at all.
I know we don't, yeah.
We've informally suggested that we could take ownership, but I think, you know, we've agreed tonight that,
That's fine. I just thought we just got contributed.
I've always
So if-
operated on the belief that we wouldn't take it on until Pendle had done all the work that was required to bring it up to a good standard.
That was the thinking, but it's never been formalised.
No.
So
So Lindsay's proposed that we carry on.
Excellent.
Right.
I'm well excited about
Tom's
switch on.
Tom seconded that, okay.
Excellent.
Right. Do we have any questions from the member of the public?
no.
Can I just let you know the Memorial Gardens, although we don't own them, we've been in and refurbed all the benches today because they weren't in great condition. So if you're wondering if you do, no, we have.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Our
No,
chats
I
with
thought
it.
it
So,
said-
you know, if he sent the pictures and they weren't in great, and it's only just been done, it's a pity to leave things, just me.
yeah.
So I think they said there was 7 in there, he sent me pictures and they just look mint. So,
Are we talking the Kelwood Road Memorial Garden there?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he's done the ones in the cenotaph too.
Pardon?
He's done the ones in the cenotaph too.
Oh.
Before
In that case,
Oh, last week.
done.
What happened to the memorial plaques that were on the benches in there?
Should still be there. It's just been in and sanded them all back,
Ah,
given
okay.
a new coat of varnish and a new hammerite in when needed. So he's going round, he's started down Skipton Road, he's done up Col Road, he's up Manchester Road, and he just keeps sending me pictures of old benches and new benches. But he's getting amazing feedback from the public. That, you know, there was some benches down the bottom of Gisborne Road I didn't even know were there.
Councillor Tom Wynn.
Just under items for information, we've had 17 people in total watching tonight, not all at once, but coming and going. And I suppose that could open the discussion about streaming meetings again, but hopefully people just appreciate that fact.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, unless there's anything else, we will conclude the
I'll
meeting.
listen in 10 minutes.
No, we'll conclude the meeting there. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a safe journey home.
I'm on holiday on Friday, just to let you all know.
How long are you on for?
I'm leaving tomorrow
Oh,
afternoon
there's
when
a
I'm
council